This is the end of the world with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and today we are talking about 2021/2024 Denis Villeneuve masterpiece, as the fans are calling it, Dune parts 1 and part 2. Part 1 and 2, parts 1 and 2. All right.
Anyway. Well, we're already back on the Villeneuve train. It took us, what, is this eight episodes deep, and we're already revisiting?
we just can't escape. It's the eternal return of the Quebecois director, right?
Canadian.
Famous. I did not realize he was Canadian. I assumed he was French, but
I just wondered if he was related to Jacques Villeneuve.
Oh, who's that again?
Driver, right?
Like
the famous F1 driver?
Yeah, Formula One. It's been a while since I was watching ESPN for 3 hours a day and knew anything about autosports. But
usually might not be Jacques Villeneuve.
No, it sounds familiar. I thought he might be a hockey player. In any case, Dune, sci-fi epic. Oddly enough, I think I've talked about the fact that as a kid I was a total freak for sci-fi. I never really read Dune when I was in that zone, and I've attempted to read the novel a few times as an adult, and both times previous I've gotten sidetracked by the dialogue. The sort of clunkiness of the dialogue is a little tough for me to take too seriously.
I've never read a page, but I often have grasped the book and been like, I'd like to do this.
I mean, it's a real tome. It's like 900 pages long. Beloved, one of the most popular sci-fi books ever. I think it's sold over 20 million copies. Came out in 1965 and has been in print constantly. It has 5 sequels, and then there's several sequels that have been written by Frank Herbert's son in the years following his death, and they're still coming out with sequels, prequels, redos. It's a real industry, the Dune industry.
Do we know how many movies they're planning on making?
I think 3. I think there's just one more after this one. After the 3rd book, it gets really weird.
It's weirder.
Oh, I mean, much weirder. I won't spoil it for anyone but I've read all of the Wikipedia précis of all of the novels. And I have, in fact, in preparation for this podcast, read the first half of the novel. And I liked it better this time than I had in past. Probably influenced by the fact that I was also seeing the movie, so I could kind of line the two things up, and it became a kind of intellectual game, if you will. So despite having a lot of experience with sci-fi, for some reason I just missed this one. It wasn't one that I got to in the golden age. I was a little bit more into sci-fi or fantasy than sci-fi. So I read things like, all the Tolkien books, the Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I read a lot of Orson Scott Card books. Are you familiar with Card at all?
No. What did he write?
Ender's Game is probably his most famous book, but there's there have been probably 20 sequels to it. Initially it was a trilogy and then tetralogy, and then he just was like, wait, I can keep making money at. He's sort of a problematic figure, very anti-LGBT. He's also a member of the LDS, so that probably those two things probably go hand in hand.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys, though, who in the early 2000s was like, I'm an old school Democrat. I'm not one of these Republicans. I just wish the Democrats would stop pandering to all these queers, or whatever. It was like, okay, yeah, wow, you're a real Democrat, Mr. Card. So he's kind of hated. He's kind of a pariah, but he's very inspired by this. I would say George R. R. Martin, in reading the first half this time, I was like, oh yeah, a lot of the Game of Thrones stuff kind of comes out of this.
Or the palace intrigue of it all?
Yeah, the palace intrigue. Also, the gendered sort of, some of the weird gender stuff, I feel like it has resonance with the Daenerys Stormborn and all that. The prophecy, obsession with prophecy, the sort of the stallion who will mount the world, or what, all of that stuff. There's even that moment, and we'll get into talking about the plot a little bit more in a second, where Stilgar in the film, Javier Bardem playing
he's great.
his second greatest role after.
I mean, he's
after
he's
That's not what I heard. Anyway, well, he cuts his hand when he's like, I'm going to give them sanction or whatever. And there's a moment in the Game of Thrones books where a character, or in the show, where a character does the exact same thing. And you're like, oh, okay, like, I invoke Sumai. I don't know, did you ever watch Game of Thrones, Michael? I forget if that was something you watched.
Yeah, I've seen, that's like the one fantasy thing I ever watched, and I think I've seen every season. I would rewatch the entire show before every season would start. So I've seen like 8 times or whatever.
Yeah, me too.
Really, and I still didn't start watching for like the first 3 seasons because of like a pretty childish
backlash.
Like, just a childish, like, I don't do fantasy. I think a lot of people dealt with that. With Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Dragons, magic, like, I'm not getting involved.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's like, oh, this is pretty incredible, which I kind of thought was what was going to happen with Dune, to some extent for me, but it really didn't. It really didn't happen.
You didn't resist. You were just.
I don't think I've ever been less drawn into a thing, which is strange because it's obviously beloved.
Yeah. All right, but before we get into all that, let's talk about Frank Herbert a little bit. Interesting guy, born in 1920 in Washington State. Actually grew up in part in a sort of like commune situation during the Great Depression. Not a time of
political reasons.
His parents were involved in like a sort of precursor to the DSA type deal, I think.
Oh, okay.
And so it
wasn't like a communal living situation out of pure necessity.
No, but I think when the Depression started, it became somewhat advantageous because they already had like a setup of people who were growing. They were growing their own food and stuff like that. They were sort of self-sufficient. That said, I don't think the Depression was particularly good for them. I don't think he had a lot of, opportunities as a child. I don't think he was going off to any expensive summer camps, shall we say.
Stay away for Herbert.
Maybe I don't really know. I mean, I guess that was definitely a thing in the 1920s and 30s, but he's got a kind of interesting political background. Despite this very lefty kind of origin, in his adulthood, he was a Republican. He like worked for, I think, a Republican senator or gubernatorial candidate in Washington at one point as a sort of speechwriter. Was an ardent supporter of Nixon. Although he's a great test case for that thing that I think I've mentioned before, that the hippies are secretly conservative, or not even secretly, that there's a strong element of conservatism to the entire hippie movement, because with Herbert you see like someone who's into like mushrooms and like Jungian psychology and like expanding the mind, but at the same time he's hates welfare. He hates
expand the mind, not the welfare state.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, exactly. Well said.
He's a libertarian or like a straight part.
Yeah, libertarian. Not a like. He is actually very anti-war. Interestingly, so he supports Nixon, but he's like very opposed to the Vietnam War. And he was not like Al Gore. I don't think he hated the protesters as much as he hated the the thing they were protesting against. He has a weird itinerant life. He went to college for a while, I think at the University of Washington, never finished, kind of just took the classes he was interested in, and he didn't like he would have been one of these people who would have thrived at like Hampshire or Bard, one of these like design your own curriculum, you want to study like the relationship.
Yeah, don't worry about grades. Don't worry about grades,
but don't worry about the math requirement either, and don't worry about having to, take a philosophy class if you don't want to, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the setup he found himself in. So he eventually just left. He worked as a journalist. One of the inspirations I read about online said that he wrote a story that was about the sort of like Oregon sand dunes. He lived, I think, for most of his life in the Pacific Northwest. I think he lived in Portland for a time, lived in Washington. He grew up in Washington, as I said. Eventually, after he became wealthy through Dune, I think he spent a lot of time in Hawaii, California, various other places. And he wrote a story about these sort of sand dunes on the Oregon coast that's kind of that started his interest in this sort of like dune ecology. And ecology was one of his like big interests. Like he was the kind of guy who was like really into doing research. Like he would go deep on a subject. He'd go all the way. So he spent a lot of time studying sort of the ecological movement as it emerged in the 50s and 60s, which is, I think, very much displayed in the novel and in the films made from his novel. He's interested in thinking about environment and a planet, as in the case of Arrakis and Dune, as a kind of system, almost as though the planet itself is like a living organism with these different like aspects of the natural world that are feeding into each other. And you sort of see that with the sandworms in Dune, right? The sandworms are
that are also like public transit.
What's that? They're probably
kind of like a public transit system.
Well, if you can befriend them, yeah, they're a natural mass transit, so the government doesn't have to subsidize it, so it's good. Stilgar and his Fremen buddies all learn to ride on them, and I think in the movies, I think that looks pretty cool. Like it seems like
looks amazing. Some of the stuff looks absolutely incredible. I don't know how many times I need to see it to keep still incredible, still with the worm, but yeah. And some of the stuff, I mean, whatever, we're a little out of place, but some of the visual stuff in the movie is just is truly breathtaking stuff. But I just there's only so many times I can go to that well and still be like, wow, look at that again, they're writing it again.
Yeah, Dune is kind of like one of those white whale projects that people have wanted to adapt it basically since it came out. The first book, I think,
was it a really popular book right away?
Not right away, but pretty quickly, yeah. And it won. Okay. It won the Nebula, the first Nebula Award, which is like one of the big sci-fi like best novel of the year awards. And it also won the Hugo Award. I think it tied with another novel that's not nearly as well remembered or well regarded. So yeah, it was pretty popular pretty quickly. And I think the first sequel comes out. The novel comes out in book form in 1965. I think it was serialized previously, published in sections in a sci-fi magazine, I think in 1962 or 1963. And he actually had a lot of trouble finding a publisher for it because
never.
Yeah. Well, he was a published writer. I mean, he'd had stories that had been published for a while, and he'd published books before. But for some reason, this sprawling epic about this like alien world, publishers. I think there's one quote where a publisher was like, "I might be making the mistake of the century, but no thanks." Sort of like the guy who told the Beatles, guitar bands are going out in like 1962 or whatever. Whoops. And yeah, it was a big mistake. I think that guy was probably canned for his failure to recognize the immense value.
It reminds me of like whoever was at Schweppes, who didn't get in on the like alcoholic seltzers. Right? I mean, what a fuck.
Oh, that was the thing? I haven't heard about that.
Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, Schweppes is peddling seltzer. You got all these companies peddling seltzer for years.
Right.
Right?
And then you've got like the White Claws and things.
And White Claw just comes in, adds alcohol to it. It's like the marketing department must have just got crushed at these companies. How did you get this one? Add alcohol? That's all we had to do to like millions of dollars?
Schweppes is a family company. We don't.
I guess that was it. It was probably like, oh, we could never,
I think another example is like Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix in like
that's
for like $200 million or something.
That's the more iconic version of this. But I for some reason I find it more like interesting to think about just some workaday marketing team at Schweppes like doing such a good job and then just getting sideswiped by the presence of alcohol in seltzer, and just like anything, No,
that is that's.
But you get it wrong. So like it was a popular classic or like a cult classic right away. Like it
won the biggest sci-fi awards. It was like very quickly like one of the sci-fi was like an emergent genre still. It was primarily like
so it wasn't as mainstream even when the first movie adaptation was attempted,
Oh,
right?
no, no, no. I mean,
Okay.
oh, no, it was pretty mainstream by then. I mean, the second novel came out in 69 and was published in hardcover, and I think was the first ever hardcover bestseller in sci-fi.
Oh wow. Okay.
Prior to that, sci-fi books were mostly softcover. You know, pick them up at the gas station or wherever they'd have one of those spinner racks of like at like an airport, that kind of thing.
What were the previous attempts to make the movie? Because
So
this is not the first time.
I mean, the most famous one is Alejandro Jodorowsky, who there's a documentary about his attempt to make Dune. It's called Jodorowsky's Dune, and it's great. And he had these like this is in the 70s, early 70s, I think, or like throughout the 70s. He had this like wildly ambitious vision for how it would do, and he hired all of these like top flight artists to help conceptualize his project. And people like Mobius, the great French comic artist, one of the greatest graphic artists of all time, and I think H.R. Geiger may have been involved at some point, the guy who did the Alien sort of designs and stuff like that. But it was too big for it was too ambitious. It could never actually be realized, and like funding kept drying up, and he'd be like, well, we just need like $3 million more at a time when like securing that kind of funding was just not easy, right? And especially not Jodorowsky's. He's from South America. I forget if he's Argentinian or Chilean. I'm canceled. But in any case, he wasn't coming from like a pure mainstream Hollywood background. Then it was adapted in the 80s by David Lynch, right?
Yeah.
And have you ever seen that version of it? With Kyle MacLachlan plays the Chalamet role.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen
Clips of
I
it.
watched of it before this, but I've never seen and I can't imagine I would ever. I could barely get through these ones, so I can't imagine I would get through the Lynch stuff.
Yeah, I mean the Lynch one is divisive because Lynch has all but disowned it. Basically, since
Oh, really?
yeah, I mean he didn't have final cut, so the producers I think ended up cutting like 60 minutes of the movie or more, and you get that you get that
use that this time around.
well, this is two movies. That's like
No,
like
Jesus. Wait, so he's doing the whole thing in one part.
yeah, so it jumps around a lot. It's like
Okay.
much more, and there's some problematic element. I mean, I love David Lynch. Obviously, he's one of my favorite artists of all time. But some problematic elements in the Lynch version. The Harkonnen Baron, the guy who, I think it's Stellan Skarsgård in this movie, right? He is obese, like in this movie, but he has all these like pock marks on his face, and it feels, and he's super. His affect is very gay, and it's at a time early '80s AIDS crisis. It feels like very homophobic. I mean, maybe not intentionally, but certainly in the context in which it was made, it feels it's a little gross. Although I will say it does have one great advantage over all other movies, and that is that Sting is in it as
What? As who?
Fade Ralpha, the rival to Paul.
What?
Yeah, it stars Sting, and he's in it more than Austin Butler is in these movies. He's there throughout, like hanging out with the Baron and stuff. Yeah,
That's a reason to watch. Sting is one of the truly most offensive people in the history of the world.
agreed.
But
I also love him.
I mean, yeah, it's a real love hate. It's a real love hate.
I love. I mean, as we established with my obsession with Tom Petty appearing in The Postman, I love it when rock stars appear in movies. David Bowie's filmography, Art Garfunkel's filmography. I don't know if you've ever dipped into Garfunkel the actor.
I did. No. What's Garfunkel in?
A lot of stuff. He's in Catch-22 most famously.
I did know
I
that.
think it's Mike Nichols, right? And then he's also in Carnal Knowledge. Mike Nichols, late 60s, early 70s, kind of.
Did he and Simon also have a rivalry about appearing in movies? Is that why they both dipped their feet in?
Well, it was part of the reason that they broke up. Yeah, it's because Garfunkel was doing more movies, and Simon was like, "Hey, we're trying to make Bridge Over Troubled Water." I mean, their relationship is funny.
a long song. Okay.
I mean, they grew up in the same area in Queens, and there's a scene in the documentary about them where they like insist the tour bus gets stopped so they can race to determine which one of them is faster. Yeah. It's a little bit like Oasis, actually, like the Gallagher brothers. They weren't actually brothers, but that kind of like just loggerheads.
With the benefit of time with Oasis, it does seem pretty clear that Liam is a kind of decent guy and Noel's an absolute piece of shit. Is that like a fair?
Yeah, but I think like
The whole thing when the Ariana Grande with the terrorist attack. Do you remember this?
I don't.
They did a whole concert for the city of Manchester. Remember this Ariana Grande? I mean,
yeah, and they were like, get Oasis back together, and Noel refused, right?
Yeah, and like McCartney was beamed in, everybody was getting involved, obviously. These are like children and their parents who have been shot,
Yeah. I mean, I think the difference is that like we didn't have to be in a band with Liam, and like Liam is like 6 years younger than Noel also.
I mean, but like to actually just be like, I can't make it. Like, dude, man, like say what you want about Oasis, pretty critical to the city of fabric.
Yeah, of course.
And in fact, there's like this really moving moment in a clip that went around at the time where the whole city, it seems, is like singing "Don't Look Back in Anger." And it's like, but actually, it's like pretty
a song that Noel sang actually.
Yes, famously, despite Liam's desire to. But like, they had it out over Twitter. He's like saying he could, and Liam's like, just you can get a private jet here. You can't cite travel.
Yeah. Anyway,
I know this has very little. I wouldn't say nothing. It has very little to do with Dune.
No. Well, Liam and Noel are kind of the Thade and Paul of.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, good. You saved it, Stu. Good work. Anyway, the Lynch movie. It's not great. It's interesting. People have tried to reclaim it. I've watched it a bunch of times. Kyle MacLachlan, kind of weird, little bit weird in that role as the sort of messiah. Not really capable of that much menace. I mean, he is kind of menacing in Showgirls, I guess, but when I think of Kyle MacLachlan, I don't think of like menace. I think of like innocence, And I think the story of Dune is really a story of a character going from innocence to a kind of darkness, right? I mean, Paul Atreides, by the end of the second movie, it's pretty clear that he's kind of a bad guy, right? Like he wins, but we don't feel that kind of uplift we do at the end of Star Wars, where we're like, oh, the Emperor's dead, and oh, Darth Vader was good all along, hooray! Like now things can go back to normal. It's like, oh, he wins, but like this is bad. like bad things are happening.
Right. I mean, it's marginally more interesting, I suppose.
Dune? I would say Dune is much more interesting than Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is a great movie, but I don't think that there's really a lot of thought that's happening in Star Wars, right? We don't learn anything about like the ecology of like the Ewok planet or whatever, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like with Dune, the world build is pretty fascinating, but to me, I just find the whole process of the movie. I mean, I also to be fair, I think I watched this in the worst possible way, in that I watched the first one on a Friday and then went to the second one on a Saturday.
Yeah,
and it's just
it was too much. Too much.
I know there's some people out there that are like, people who complain about long movies, like, grow up. And like, I guess that's true.
Gen Z is in love with long movies. I don't know what's wrong with you millennials.
But like,
complaining freaks.
This was really an experience where I felt very bad about myself for my inability to enjoy
to get into it.
Because hearing everybody loving it, everyone's into it, and then I go and I'm like, I don't know, the story, I guess it's like a little quirk of a take on the genre, but like, I don't know, it all just felt so labored to me. Like, so much of the dialogue in the first one is like, they build the world by just explaining in the quickest, like simplest ways that just bore the hell out of me.
Let's talk about that. I mean, they trim out a lot of stuff that's in the novel just because you have to, right?
Yeah.
Like, how could you not? In the novel, every chapter is prefaced by a little saying from the princess, who we meet in the second movie, Florence Pugh. She's written this book after the events have all transpired, sort of documenting what happened. So each chapter starts with a little excerpt from her writings. So she's almost like a narrator, and in those little excerpts, they're usually just a paragraph long, or some of them are only a couple lines long. A lot of that world building is accomplished. You sort of get info on like who these people are, like what are the Bene Gesserit, who is this Dr. Yue guy, like so a lot of that is kind of like fleshed out in a way that the movie like can't do. You can't just have like a voiceover coming in every 15 minutes being like, remember Dr. Yue was the blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
So another thing that they cut out from the movie that I'm kind of there's no computers in Dune, right? There are like simple computers, but there's no AI, because in the novel we learned that like thousands of years ago, before the events have transpired that are transpiring in the story have taken place, there was an event called the Butlerian Jihad, where humans went to war against thinking machines and won. But as a result, all AI and like thinking robots or anything like that was all destroyed and outlawed forever. So
like Cylon?
It's a little bit like that. I mean, this is before Battlestar Galactica, of course. So Butler, I was like, who's the butler in this? Is it it's Samuel Butler, a 19th century English writer who has a novel about some of these themes. But in any case, that doesn't come up at all, and I think that's like kind of crucial context for the world of Dune, which is that like they don't have computers. Instead, they have these guys who are trained to sort of they're trained from to be like living computers, basically.
Yeah.
The guy, I forget his name off the top, but he's a great character actor. He's been in tons of stuff. His name is Thufir Hiwat or something like that. He's like one of the advisors of Duke Leto in the first movie. And he is one of these things. They're called a mentat. In the book, we also learn that like Paul, in addition to being like trained by his mother in the secret witch ways of the Bene Gesserit, has also received mentat training. So he's like a living computer who's also has these witch powers that are usually only given to women. And he's the heir to this powerful house. And he's starting to have these.
Why are they only given to women? Is it they don't trust men with it?
I think it's because men have a lower tolerance of pain and can usually not survive the box test that we saw, where he puts his hand in the box and has to resist the pain while she holds.
Right. That's a great scene.
Yeah, that's like so iconic. I was watching the 70s horror movie Phantasm the other day. You ever see Phantasm?
No.
It's great, low budget, weird horror movie about a mortuary where they turn the bodies into these dwarves that then become slaves on another planet. But there's a scene in it where an old witchy woman forces a kid to hold his hand in a box, and like she doesn't say the line. I mean, "Fear is the mind killer" is like the famous line from the novel. They kind of de-emphasize a lot of the most famous iconic phrases from the novel. Another one is the spice, right? So the whole book revolves, and the movie revolves around spice, right? Which is this resource that's like very valuable, because not only does it have these like healing psychotropic powers, which we see when Paul starts to have his his prophetic dreams, right?
Yeah.
But it is also the substance that allows intergalactic space travel, because the space navigators take it, and because they don't have these computers that can make these calculations, they need to rely on these like psychotropically so this is what we call soft sci-fi, right? Like, this isn't real. We're not going to come to a time in human history where it's like, actually, like, we need to give our like navigators LSD, and then we can go to Alpha Centauri, no problem, right? But in the book, they refer to it as traveling without moving, right? Yeah, the famous title of a Jamiroquai album. I don't know if you.
I mean, fantastic.
Yeah, good album.
Virtual Insanity, isn't that the album that's on?
Yeah, yes, that is the album.
The song was ahead of its time.
Not to be confused with the Return of the Space Cowboy, their prior album. Wonder what J.K. is up to. I think that was the guy with the hat. Remember the hat? Anyway, but obviously a very Dune-inspired band. Dune stuff is everywhere. Like once you get aware of it, you start to see like all of these parts of culture that have been subtly influenced by Dune. Um, and I'm going on a flight tomorrow, and I'm planning on listening to the rest of Dune on the at like two times speed as an audiobook
Sure.
on my flight out to Utah, where I'll be examining sand dunes. Actually, no. But in any case, it's I've gotten so Dune pilled in the last like 4 days that I'm just now like
actually, you're into it. You're into it now.
Yeah, I'm in. I got in finally. I got pulled in. So yeah, let's just go over the plot briefly and talk about how it deals with the themes. So there's all these different groups, right? There's the Harkonnens, who are the previous owners of Arrakis. The Atreides are like being given Arrakis, and it's a trap, right? The Emperor, who as we learn in the second film is Christopher Walken, in a very odd. What did you think about Walken? Like I've seen a lot of people tweeting that they like found him kind of distracting, right?
I mean, it didn't stand out to me as a bad thing, but then I wasn't really engaging with the movie in a particularly critical way because I was like so out on the story, unfortunately.
So you like didn't take your recommended dosage of spice before watching?
Yeah, I basically was just like, oh, cool, Walken's in it too. Like, because that's the thing. Like, it was a very weird experience. I liked so many of the visual elements of the movie.
Yeah.
And then I also like some of the performances were really good. I thought Austin Butler was pretty sort of enthralling.
Pretty extra.
I mean, I just like I was pretty enraptured by his presence on screen.
Yeah, he's great. He's great at everything.
But in general, like when it comes to what was going on, I don't think I've ever been less invested in a story in anything I've ever watched. Like it truly just.
I mean, you watched The Postman recently, Michael.
I mean, but like I think it's my fault. Like there was too much information. I was pretty tired. It's pretty late. Work week's done. There's so much. I'm admittedly like confusing. Like I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference or pronunciation of like Lisan Al Gaib and Bene Gesserit. Like I don't know which is which. I don't really know.
Lisan Al Gaib. That's the like.
That's the prophet.
The Fremen name for the Messiah. Yeah.
Right, and then the Bene Gesserit is like
they're the witch order.
They know the way. Is that right?
Yeah, they're like a combination.
So the whole time I'm watching, I'm kind of saying that. That's my internal dialogue. I'm like, wait, so who are they? I couldn't quite, and it really did like profoundly make me aware of my limitations as a viewer at this stage in my life, which is pretty concerning. Like, I didn't have the mental capacity to like watch these 6 hours of footage and then care about what the fuck the outcome was going to be.
Okay.
In any way.
Fair enough. I mean, there's a lot going on in these movies. And as I said, they're compressing stuff and omitting stuff that's even more...
I think when I look at the way I digested Game of Thrones, my impression of Dune is I think I would have liked this more.
If it were like a series.
A full multi-season television.
Well, there was actually, I forgot to mention this, but there was a sci-fi channel adaptation in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Which I have not seen, but which people say is pretty good. I think it doesn't have the budget, obviously, of these movies. So I'm sure the sandworm stuff is pretty pretty dated at this point. Probably doesn't look that awesome. So I think, to be a little critical of Dune, I rewatched the first movie. I saw it when it first came out, and then I saw the sequel after you told me. You're like, have you seen Dune yet? We could do an episode about it. And I was like, no, I haven't. So I went last Sunday, and I saw it, and I pretty much loved it. I wouldn't say loved it, but I thought it was really good. I mean, I thought it did what it was trying to do really well, and like kind of brought everything to a satisfying close and ended on the right notes. But one thing I will say is that like I agree, like the dialogue is pretty hokey at times, right? I mean, when he's training with Gurney, who's Josh Brolin, right? There's that in the first movie. There's that fighting scene where they're practicing swords or whatever, and he's like, the Harkonnens, they're not even human. They're brutal. It's just like there's lines like that which are like taken pretty much from the book. that are just kind of like, all right, like it's a little,
Yeah,
it's a little
I get
like
that.
heavy-handed.
Right, like Paul, like when he's like he just yelled stuff to convey its importance in a way that seems really tired. Like, it's like it's not hope, and I'm like, okay, I'm like totally being drawn out of this,
Yeah,
like.
yeah. I mean, I would say
And it's
that's
just like just him right away bothered me. I think it's just like the whole thing of like wanting to be the leader, but the right way, and
well,
like
that's
him going,
all. There's a lot of classic hero's journey stuff
yes,
in this movie, right?
sure. And it's just
He's
like,
refusing the call. No, I can't follow the
I guess to
prophecy.
me, it's like that it all seemed like it was the entire movie was like laid out, the two movies like laid out in front of me in the first 20 minutes in terms of like what I was gonna
Yeah,
have
I
to.
mean, like, and in the books you have this feeling too because of the sort of retrospective previews that you get at each chapter, right? Like, you know that he's gonna win, right? It's not a spoiler. Like, he will become the emperor, like the god emperor of Dune, right? And that's one of the sequels. Although I think that refers more to one of his sons, but I don't want to get into too many spoilers. Got yelled at by my younger brother for spoiling things on the podcast.
I mean, what have we done that's recent? We've spoiled Don't Look Up for him.
No, no, I forget what it was. Oh, it was Last of Us. He was like,
Okay, that's sort of
you
on the
did kind of
borderline.
spoil Last of Us. I'm like, I don't know. The game came out 10 years ago. I mean, also
Yeah,
like if you,
this book's been out since
I mean,
1965, but I guess it is new. It's
yeah,
fair to.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there will be a third movie probably. I think this movie's done well enough to justify it. So I don't want to get into spoilers for that too much. But basically, like, we know that he's the Messiah, right? Like, that's not a. But it's kind of interesting because the whole idea of there being a Messiah on the planet of Arrakis is something that was like planted by the Bene Gesserit, right? Of whom
Yep.
his mother is like a chief member, right?
They're the ones that control breeding and stuff. So
Exactly. Like they're kind of the equivalent of they're like a religious order, but they're also the CIA, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
where they're pulling the strings behind the scenes, they're like arranging assassinations, they're helping, they're working for the emperor but also kind of against him, there's in the books there are like other people who are like this, like the mentats have their own kind of offshoot like order, and then there's like this thing called the spicing guild where they're like the people that transport the spice, and like so they're like that. This is the kind of Game of Thrones where there's like all these factions that are kind of swirling around.
Yeah.
And in the book you get like this scene in the first section of the first novel where they're like at a dinner party and like representatives of all these groups are like there, and you're kind of like, okay, like, so there's like a spy kind of aspect to it, right? And in the book it's much clearer why the doctor betrays the family. Like, in watching the first movie over, I was like, his betrayal kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
In the novel there's like a few, because that little dart that tries to kill Paul early on, there's like a big hunt for like who's the traitor, and like the mentat thinks it's Jessica, and like Jessica thinks it's this other guy, and like and like we have insight into, he uses the sort of third person omniscient free and direct discourse style thing where he'll go into the characters' minds briefly, and like you'll hear what Dr. Yue is thinking, and like the movie like can't do that, right? It can't like have voiceover for each character like explaining their actions in retrospect. This is the classic difference between film and novels. But his betrayal feels more motivated, and it feels more like you get it. He's like torn by it, but he like feels like he has to do it, and it sort of makes more sense. Whereas in the movie, it kind of came out of nowhere for me. What do you think about the ornithopters? Do you know what an ornithopter is? Why
No.
would you? An ornithopter is like a helicopter, except instead of having a blade on the top,
Oh, I love those things.
it's like got flapping
That was
wings.
cool. That was one thing I was watching. I was like, pretty cool helicopters. I think that's an exact line of my viewing experience.
Yeah, well,
Give you
bad
a-
news. Bad news. You'll never guess who designed an ornithopter.
No, who?
Our old enemy.
Da Vinci?
Yeah, that freak. That freak designed an ornithopter. Guess what? Would you believe it if I told you that his ornithopter could never work,
Yeah.
was utterly unfunctional,
I mean,
and
definitely without spice. Does it need spice to work in the Dune world?
I don't know if we ever get that explained to us.
Well,
Or
the
like,
things Da Vinci could have done with spice, you know?
yeah, I mean, ornithopters are fun. I think I read something about ornithopters because people tried to make them in the 19th century, like in the Wright brothers, like Kitty Hawk, like that era.
Yeah.
And there's some funny videos on
Kitty
YouTube.
Hawk era. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, the Kitty Hawk era of flight. When the race to be the first into the air, powered flight, right? Not gliding flight.
Were they using Da Vinci's
Well,
template?
yeah, I mean, in some cases, they attempted to modify his inventions. Basically, the problem is, in order to have an ornithopter that would actually work, though, the wings would need to be like really huge. They'd have to
Okay.
be like football field size wings, which is awkward, even for like a modern helicopter size ornithopter. So like
Looks great in the movie.
in the movie, they look awesome.
They look so
I always like ornithopters. They appear a lot in the fantasy novels of Michael Moorcock. Also, he's a British fantasy writer around the same time, and I always wondered, did he get? I think he must have gotten them from Herbert. But I like I don't know. I think it's cool to be like flying around in a little bug. But in any case, yeah, the ornithopters are awesome. The Bene Gesserit are cool. The scene where they try and like they go to the sort of spice collector, and the one of the clamps breaks, and it gets sucked up by the worm. But Duke Leto's like, forget the spice, like save the men, right? There's this sort of like kind of like realpolitik Machiavellian reading where it's like Duke Leto dies because like he's a good person. He's not like he's like too concerned with like decency and like taking care of others. And if he were like the Harkonnens, he would just be like a savage sociopath who like only cares about winning, right? And so Paul is kind of in a way, as we learn, Paul is like both Harkonnen and Atreides, right? His mother was a secret Harkonnen. He didn't know, but
he's got Harkonnen blood.
right. So he's both. So
Yeah.
he's like an attempt to bring balance to the Force. There was certain moments in the second film, especially, where I got like Hayden Christensen as Anakin vibes,
100.
right?
You're not great vibes.
No, but I'd say Chalamet is significantly better. I mean, I think
Yes.
like the dialogue in this film is better. It's not great, but it's
Oh,
better than the prequels, right? But just like that look in his eye when you're like, oh, is he like becoming a little bit evil?
I know. Yeah. It's that throughout the whole movie. It's like, is he getting a little less hesitant? Is he getting a little more sure of himself? Is he like it's just so like telegraphed to me. The Harkonnen stuff's really cool. The like whole black and white sequences, like those
Yeah.
really,
I mean,
I
so
think
like the first
are-
movie is basically, I think the first movie is interesting because it ends in a very anticlimactic way, right? Where it's like they've lost. It's kind of like it has that sort of V structure where you're like they're at the bottom by the end of the first movie, and then the second movie it's like them climbing back up, right?
yeah.
And it ends like they've been defeated. The friendly Fremen doctor is dead. Father's dead. The assassination with the poison tooth doesn't kill the Baron. It's like everything goes wrong. Duncan Idaho is dead. Jason Momoa, R.I.P. And
Duncan. That's the other thing. These names are so great 'cause it's like it's in this world. It's like Arrakis, Harkonnen, and then Paul and Duncan, Idaho.
yeah.
It's just weird. Paul, the guy's name's just Paul,
And his
out of
mother,
nowhere?
his mother is Jessica.
Yeah, leave Jess. Yes, just Jess and Paul saving the world.
Well, I think one thing that's funny is that we learn in one of the later novels written by Herbert himself is that this is all set in our universe.
Really?
Yeah, this is set in the far future of
And
our.
so Paul also made it. It's a direct lineage over 10,000 years. The name Paul just hung on.
Yeah, and there are certain
You
things
say
like
nothing of Duncan, Idaho, hanging
yeah,
on. So I was-
Idaho. People remember Idaho. It's beloved. It's a beloved state, beloved territory.
But like I have no idea what happens in the end, like in the third installment.
It's not
think
good. It's not good.
I think so. Like, how often am I be like Zendaya? What's the character's name? Chani.
Chani,
Chani?
yeah, Chani.
maybe she's the actual Messiah. Is that possible?
No, sorry.
No, that's wrong. Okay, that's the way I was hoping it would end.
No, but that would be cool. I mean, maybe they'll flip it for the book, you know.
But it did. That doesn't happen in the book.
In the book, no. He marries the
Well, don't tell me what happened. I do want to see the third one.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for our
I think
listeners.
I think she's really great too.
She's
I mean,
great. I love her in everything though. She's just
I know.
she's a compelling actor, you know.
She's very, very compelling, and like, but I do get the sense that in a lot of the scenes they share, I think she kind of pushes him around a bit.
She's kind of carrying it because
just like it's just significantly more compelling to me.
Yeah.
Might also be one of the most beautiful people you've ever like. You know.
Yes.
Although I guess
Chalamet's not.
Chalamet's very handsome as well.
He's a good-looking person. Yes, I agree. So the second movie, like one thing they cut out from the book is that he and Chani, Paul and Chani, have a kid, like early on in the like they have a small child, who they name Leto, who in the course of the basically the second part of the second half of the novel is the second movie essentially, and in the second half of the novel they have a kid. The second half it takes place over years though, like their rebellion against the Harkonnens, all the stuff we see in the second movie that lasts for years and years in the books, and in the movie they've kind of compressed it, so it's all a few months, right?
Yeah.
And they cut out the whole thing with the whole because that kid ends up getting killed by the Harkonnens. Like in that scene where the lady is immolated, like she's left behind to guard the siege, and they like catch her, the friend of Chani, and they burn her with their blowtorches or whatever. That's the scene essentially where their kid is actually one of the people that gets killed. They cut out all that. I think it's fine. Like I think it's wise. It works well.
Okay.
The second movie, a couple of my favorite things. Bardem, I think, is just great as the believer. Like whatever Paul does or says.
Like it is written. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, he pulls it back to the prophecy. In the theater I saw it in, people were cracking up at basically everything he said.
Is kind of like that's the other thing. Like I laughed a few times.
Yeah.
In the theater, and people I was with didn't really seem to like that. And it's like, come on, man! Like some of this is so funny. Like I don't need to take it this seriously, do I? Like the guy's riding around on a worm. Like, it's funny.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. There's ridiculous. I mean, one of the things that I think Herbert was really concerned with in writing Dune was messiahs. Like he thinks messiahs are bad, right? He's like very anti-messiah because which fits.
Well, you don't quite know whether there's a real messiah or they have just misidentified Paul.
Well, there's this whole thing where it's like once they take the water of life, the blue potion, they can see the future, but they can't see the whole future. It's like winding paths. Like if this happens, then it'll go this way. So he has like foresight, and so he's the Messiah in as much as like and there's a scene when he's like taking power where he's like, your wife did this last night, or like he's like telling people in the crowd like it's like a cold reading event or something.
You're not the father.
Yeah. Well, and then also like the Bene Gesserit have also been cultivating Fade Routha as like another possible Messiah, right? Mm. So there's like a Messiah, but there are like a bunch of options. And they're like, well, we'll have them fight, and whichever wins, like, we still win, because, like, we chose all the players on the board, right? Yeah. Which is, I think, interesting, right? But Herbert was, like, really worried about JFK, for instance. He thought JFK was, like, a messiah. He was like, oh, this JFK guy is so charismatic, I don't like him. He's gonna, get all these like welfare programs passed, and like, but he's
like one of the few people who like saw the televised Nixon Kennedy debate
and was like, I'm with Nixon.
I'm with the sweaty guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck this smooth motherfucker.
Like, exactly. Like, and by the end of the movie, they have Fade Routha and Paul are fighting, right? And like, Paul wins, and then there's that scene where Jessica's like, "You chose the wrong side." And I think it's Charlotte Rampling or whatever was like, sides? Ha ha ha! You, my dear, should know that's ridiculous. And it's like, fair enough, right? I mean, like, they put all these pieces here. Whoever wins, it's like heads I win, tails you lose, right? Like they're going to win no matter what. Yeah, it's a couple major themes just to wrap up. Obviously, resource management. Obviously, like, Paul is Lawrence of Arabia. Arrakis is the Middle East. Spice is oil, right? I mean, there's like obvious, like, direct historical analogies in this film that you don't see that in a lot of fantasy where things are so overt, right? Kind of interesting. Yeah, I mentioned he really hates messianism, and, like, fair enough. Look at our world right now.
Yeah,
Like, Donald Trump is the Messiah, and people are like, anything Trump does, there are people on Twitter who are just like, this is a 4D chess move, like, by not, by, like, losing this trial to Stormy Daniels or whatever. It's just like, like,
by not being able to post the bond, he's actually
no, like, exactly. It's like, no matter what he does, it's like,
no matter what he does or doesn't do,
it's Stilgar is going to still believe it's part of the prophecy, right? And I mean, that kind of thinking, and it exists on the Dem side too. We see it with these, like, Mueller she wrote types, right? Where it's just like,
right?
Jack Smith is
Jack
Smith is the new Mueller or whatever, right?
The last noble man is always the, like, independent investigator.
Yeah, and like, they're gonna, like, solve everything.
Remember the Mueller love? Oh my god.
Oh yeah, I have friends who are just all in on that, and it's like, it's like, this isn't how things work, like. And I think the Trump presidency really shows that, because, like, Trump came in with all this bluster and, like, couldn't actually really get anything done for the most part. Could, like, say a lot of offensive and racist things, and
made up a lot of money during COVID.
Yeah, weird. Yeah. Oh yeah. But anyway, actually, maybe you're right. Maybe I am. No. Maybe he is the Messiah. No. Other big themes. Obviously, he grew up. I mean, I think his fear of messianism is just a byproduct of having seen Hitler and, like, World War II, and just, like, lived through that time. And been like, yeah, this is really bad. Like, like, I think I might feel that way had I, like, watched that happen as well. Like,
I think I got 1,000 pages on this. This was bad.
Oh, I think I could get 6 novels on this. I think I become a multimillionaire. Another big theme we've already talked about a little bit: the Bene Gesserit as CIA, right? Just, like, in the back rooms. But I think my friend David and I were talking about it, and he was like, the ultimate thing about the CIA and the KGB is that they just love the status quo, right? They, like, love their power, and, like, the best way for them to keep their power is that nothing really changes, right?
Right, so they're playing this whole game to maintain
exactly. Yeah. That they're actually not, like,
not even bothering to move to something.
Right. Well, they'll move and counter move, but all the counter moves are ultimately aimed at stasis, right?
Yep.
So when something like Russia, Soviet Union collapsing happens, like, all these people who've been, like, in Russian language school, like Condoleezza Rice is a perfect example, right? She's someone who trained her whole life to be, like, a Russia expert, and then it's like 1991. Well, Soviet Union's gone. She's like, well, now I am an Iraq expert. It's just like, and obviously, like, Arrakis, Iraq, like, there's even a clear, like, oral pun there. Another thing, we talked about a little bit, ecology, right? I think that's one of the things that this book is, like, really, book and movie, it's like, it's presenting this whole world system in a way that I find, like, quite compelling and, like, like, realistic.
And I think visually Villeneuve does a really good job about it as well.
With the spice on the desert sand and stuff. And,
like, I think you really do get, like, that notion of the system comes through what you're actually watching.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't read the book, but I assume that's pretty purposeful from Villeneuve to, like, paint the setting as a character itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And I think what we learn in the books is that, like, the spice comes from the worms. Like, the worms generate the spice, but the worms can only exist in this arid environment where there's no water. So it's like the whole, like, lack of water, creation of spice, they're all, like, in balance with each other. Like, they all inform and create each other. Another thing I think he's interested in, right, is just, like, the decline and fall of, like, great powers and empires, right? Because, like, clearly this... What's that?
I would say I would say he's interested.
Yeah, because like clearly what we're seeing with this, like, and this is like a much older empire than anything that we've had in the. This is like the 90th generation of like, right? They say
Right.
at some point like Paul is the like result of 90 generations of breed. It's like 90 generations. It's
Yeah.
like that's like tens of thousands of years, right? And so you've got some echoes of like with the Fremen rising up. I mentioned Lords of Arabia, but it's also kind of fall of the Tsars or French Revolution.
And the Tsar in Russia has been in power for centuries.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Or the Ancien regime in France, right? It's like
Yeah.
the people just like rising up and being like, F this. And then what tends to happen in the aftermath of that? A little bit of excess. So sort of overcorrection, if you will.
Yep.
Funnily enough, I noticed that J.R.R. Tolkien, the other great pillar of the sort of fantasy pillar, hated Dune.
Really?
Just despised it, and was in fact offered a chance to review it, and he was like, "I will not. Like, I don't want to disparage like a fellow."
Why? Why did he hate it?
I mean, he didn't say. He never reviewed it, but
Was it just like the good and evil weren't made clear enough?
yeah, I think so, right? And I mean, like, it wasn't.
That's not a hero's journey. This is a hero's journey.
Well, it wasn't racist enough against the Fremen, or like, there was no evil race like the orcs or whatever. Yeah, so I mean, I ended up really liking it. Like, I thought the movie was good. I thought both movies are good. I watched this, I watched them both again in the last few days. Or I watched the first one again, I should say. And it's thoughtful. And, like, I think it relates to the themes of this podcast in as much as it's, like, it is about this, like, turning over. This, like, I mean, the apocalypse means opening up, right? The unveiling. And it's sort of, like, about what happens when these, like, religious forces, because like the Fremen start
these religious forces, this like backroom dealing, this multi-generational breeding program, when these things come to roost, right? And that's when the sort of paradigm shift.
And believe it or not, it does not just immediately usher in an age of utopia.
Except when it happens to us, I'm sure it will.
Well, yeah, except when Trump is reelected, then
we're due.
We'll get the med beds, and
I'll get 900 a week on UI.
All right, good stuff. I think that covers it on Dune. Any last?
Yeah. So,
what's that?
And next time we're actually flipping completely and going from something that I couldn't stand or understand, as I'm sure listeners have gathered, to something that might be my favorite piece of, let's say, apocalyptic genre content, and that is, for my money, one of probably the handful of greatest television shows of all time, The Leftovers. And we will be covering that next week. And I think the idea, Stu, is to, unlike this where we shoehorned 6 hours of footage into one, the plan is to do season by season.
Yeah. So the next week we'll be covering season 1. A good season, but I think probably the worst season of the show, actually. Like,
I mean, worst or just like not quite as amazing as 2 and 3 would be the way I would describe it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's still great. It's very dark though. It's not an optimistic. As much as Dune is not optimistic, Leftovers really not very optimistic.
Yeah, that's right. Let's not spoil it. I mean, if anybody is going to listen next week, you've had what? When did that? Like, they've had what? How many years to watch it? So do a quick.
The last season was like 17, maybe 16, something like that. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. I look forward to talking about it, and please share the pod. Follow
us on Instagram at the End of the World WMS. Any ratings, any follows, any shares, tragically in this system of ours, do help greatly. So please.
Yeah, exactly. And if we hear anything new about the royal family, we'll be sure to keep you informed next week. But
I just got a news piece come across my saying that a source says that when it is revealed what has been going on with Kate, which is strictly a health matter, people like you and I,
we're
the public, are going to feel unfathomable levels of guilt, I believe was the get ready to feel so guilty.
Unfathomable. I think that's one of my favorite words. Did I write this article?
But yeah, we'll keep updating.
Good. Yeah, we'll keep on top of it. All right. Until then, this is The End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and we will see you next time.